Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 3Sports podcast. I am Ben Axelrod. Joining me, as always, is Craig Lindell of Waiting for Next Year. Before we start this, I want to congratulate you. 10 years of WFNY. We didn't do a podcast last week.
No.
I think because we usually do this on Thursday, and last Thursday I just don't know if it would have been feasible with everything that happened with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I really enjoyed your guys' celebration. One of the reasons I'm actually okay that we didn't do a podcast was other than the trade deadline, like there just isn't a lot going on other than the same Cavs drama we could rehash. But I thought it was cool, the look back at the last decade that you guys did.
It was really fun, and it's interesting that we ended up not having a party. We thought about having a party, and so I instantly aimed for that February 10th because the Super Bowl's gone. Mm-hmm. It's a dead zone, and so if we were going to invite people in the media and our friends or whatever else, we would have much fewer conflicts than what we would normally have. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it's hard to believe. I've been there for about 9.5 of the 10 years, and just to have a sports blog kind of survive, because they don't make any financial sense.
Right.
Like there's no business reason for the website to actually exist.
Right.
It's a subsistence thing. But it's been so much fun, and it's, I mean, even like, you may not think it's a big deal, but even our relationship with WKYC and doing stuff like this, it's been a lot of fun for us over the years just to kind of legitimize ourselves in the sports media landscape.
Well, it certainly is, and that it's one of the reasons I love doing stuff with you and hanging out with Scott is it really is a hashtag brand. Like you guys have cultivated a really cool brand of by the Cleveland sports fan for the Cleveland sports fan. But you're right, their blogs, sports blogs have come and gone. I mean, I've started a few. Anthony Lima, I know, has started a few. They're so hard to maintain, so hard to keep up with. You're right, financially, they don't make a whole lot of sense. You guys have your day jobs and your real jobs that pay the bills. But yeah, it's been really cool to see, and that's I highly recommend to go check out some of the podcasts you guys put out last week because I thought they were really well done. But getting to...
Well, hang on. Let's talk about the dead zone in the sports calendar, because that probably fed the virality of your engagement, which I'm sure most people who are listening to this probably already saw it on Twitter, saw it on Facebook, and we don't need to delve into it like crazy, but obviously you and I talked about it because it's the first time I've seen you since it happened.
Right.
How much do the dead zone in the sports calendar? We're pre-NBA All-Star deadline. Football's over. The draft season has not ramped up.
Yeah.
This was a fringe sports story.
It was. I mean, but I think Barstool Sports was really, other than Darren Rovell tweeting it, I think Barstool Sports was probably the only site to write an article about it, and that's only because the writer who wrote it follows me, Nate. We're both wrestling fans, so we keep tabs on
Barstool
one another.
Nate.
Yeah, Barstool Nate. He's pretty funny. I really enjoy his blogs, regardless of whatever some of you might think about Barstool. I think a lot of it's very well written in terms of humor. But anyways, but other than that, it was like the strangest one was the Daily Mail, which is like the big gossip website in the UK. Is like, I think I remember on Lebitard once they were debating whether or not that was okay to cite. They wrote probably the most like salacious blog about my engagement that you could, and like included like pictures from our Instagram and stuff that we didn't ever give permission for them to use, which is fine. I mean, we have open Instagrams, but yeah, that was I for as much as I seek attention at times, the intent of me posting publicly about my engagement to my now fiance is that was not the intent of it, but it was a very surreal experience.
And it's crazy. I've been invited on podcasts before, even other long form podcasts, and I put myself out there a lot.
Yeah.
Like you can find a lot of information about me, but mostly in my own words or in my own format. I've created it and I'm putting it out there. It's always a little bit disconcerting when you are giving over yourself to somebody else to put out there.
Right.
And you're not, I'm a control freak, and I'm guessing you are too, because you're a self-made publisher, self-made podcast. Like,
yeah.
Even though you've done it under people's banners,
right.
You're the one taking the initiative. You're the host,
right.
Like the owner of it. And it's so weird when, like, the Daily Mail, Barstool, you're trusting a lot of people to take that story and tell it, and they're going to get stuff wrong. Hopefully not, like, dangerously so, but
right.
They're not going to get it all right.
No, that's... Well, even like, so in a lot of the headlines, my girlfriend / I still call her my girlfriend.
Fiancée.
Yeah, my girlfriend Tori, they would refer in the headline refer to her as a personal trainer, because that's in her Twitter bio, and she's a certified personal trainer, and she like passed the test and everything, but that's just something she does on the side. Like she has a whole day job. Like she's not even actively a personal trainer at the moment.
Okay.
So like it's just kind of funny, and like
that's funny because I thought she was
right.
I don't know you that well.
Yeah, and I was presented as like an author or something because I wrote one book about Urban Meyer. Like it's just funny, but yeah, that's.
Are you a New York Times best-selling author?
If I am, somebody should let me know, because I'll be. I'd like to get attention for that. I'm pretty sure I'm not, and based on my royalty checks,
you could
I'm not
be.
Either.
You could be if you wrote the LeBron book.
That's a hell of a transition. That's definitely. Let's start there then. Let's get into the Cleveland Cavaliers and the NBA trade deadline.
So since we last left you,
yes,
the Cavs are a disaster. Their roster is old, and then nothing happened. Right? Nothing's happened in the last 2 weeks.
It's so funny because I think the last time we talked, they were coming off. I think it was that loss to Orlando where they blew the big lead. And
we were not having fun.
And I remember they played Minnesota the last night, and that actually wound up being a fun game. But I remember saying to you, or maybe that was even just last week. They
were losing a lot.
They were losing a lot, and I remember being upset like when they would play, being like, I have to watch the Cavs again. And now they make all these trades, completely transform their roster, and it's so annoying now that I have to go 9 days in between seeing Jordan Clarkson and George Hill and Larry Nance Jr. and Rodney Hood play again. Like it's and a renewed LeBron James. But it really, I guess, let's go back to that trade deadline Thursday, because it was one of those days, like in Cleveland sports history, that is just going to stick out like a sore thumb, where you're going to remember the way you processed all of it. I don't know if you have any unique stories or like so the last time they did this was in 2008. They basically flipped their entire roster to the Chicago Bulls and Seattle Supersonics.
Wally Zerbiak, Delonte West, Ben Wallace. And Joe Smith.
They sent out Larry Hughes.
Joe Smith, not the pitcher.
Yeah.
The former number 1 overall pick center.
Yes. And that, I remember I was a freshman in college. It was very pre-Twitter, right before Twitter. I remember watching a trade deadline show and it like coming in.
I was streaming radio at my desk.
Wow.
Because that was the most instantaneous way to get updates.
And it's so funny to look now, because now the way I process, let's go to the first trade, the Isaiah Thomas trade.
By the way, so I had two windows open on my computer. Mm-hmm. One was Woj and the other one was Shams. Yeah. And I'm just refreshing them from time to time.
Yeah.
Looking for updates.
Oh, yeah. That's NBA more than any other sport has lent itself to you turn on the alerts for Woj, especially in July.
I never thought to turn on the alerts.
Turn
I
on
should
the
have done that. I just had tabs.
I'll tell you, it's Woj, Windhorst,
and now it's
Shams, and I'd say Mark Stein.
Yeah.
I remember the soft season of 2015, so right after the Cavs finals.
You've awakened me, because the alerts will also keep me from having to check blue check marks.
Yep. And so,
because the blue check marks will get you on deadline day.
Yeah. People got, and that's what
Have you gotten got before?
No.
I definitely have. I've corrected it quickly, but I've been had.
I get got in the sense that I'll see something and my stomach will sink, and I'll be like, "Oh my God, this is happening! But because of because of the world we live in, I have to check for the blue check mark.
See, and I do that now, but fake Adam Schefter.
Yeah.
ADARN looks like ADAM.
Yeah, Adarn Schefter.
I've been gotten by Adarn Schefter.
It's amazing. But so So this was my day.
And plus, that's usually Browns related, and anything about the Browns is believable.
Right, that's the thing. It has to be. There has to be somewhat of a level of believability, and the Browns know no limits when it comes to expanding what's possible.
Yeah.
But okay, so it's trade deadline day. I'm in my cafeteria at work, and I'm talking to my boss, and I'm saying we should just set up a running blog, and I should have thought of this the day before. But we should just set up a running blog of these are the trade rumors that are happening and put them all in one place. So I go back to my desk and I get to set up this blog because the hot rumor was the Cavs were closing in on Kemba Walker and that they were pursuing Kemba Walker and talking to the Hornets about it.
And the DeAndre Jordan rumors were still happening too.
That was going on. So I was like, I can put these all in one place. Because it's going to be impossible to keep up with every single rumor.
And as you update, you keep pushing the older stuff lower and lower and lower.
And so this is probably around 11 a.m. And so I figure I have at least until – nothing's going to come down until 1 or 2 or probably closer to 3.
Well, 3 p.m. was the deadline itself.
3 p.m. is the deadline. And so I get back to my desk and I see a tweet from Woj. And this is what's so funny about going back to you streaming radio in 2008 and me watching an ESPN desk show that I needed to tell me what was going on in the NBA. I see a tweet from Woj that says the Cavs and Lakers are in serious talks for a deal. So that's important because if you're a longtime follower of Woj, two teams talking is different than serious talks. Serious talks usually means it's going to happen.
He's got his own language.
Two teams talking is a rumor. I remember the Isaiah Kyrie trade. That was it was serious talks, and so it was like, okay, we know to pay attention to this. And then it comes out probably 15 minutes later that the Cavs are getting back Nance Jr. and Clarkson. We don't know who the Cavs are trading.
No.
So at first we have the team, then we have the pieces of who the Cavs are getting, and then probably 15 minutes after that, we have who the Cavs are sending out. It's just so funny to see now. It used to be you got the deal all at once.
Yes.
Now you get, they're nearing a deal. Here's who one team's getting. Here's who that team is sending out. And it was just, I guess a lot of people didn't like the trade at first. I think because of the first round pick. It made a little more sense once we got the other deal. But it was just an amazing deal to watch unfold.
It was. And the interesting in the aftermath is that, like, I can't tell you which Cavaliers went which direction. All I can tell you is which guys came back, which says a whole lot about what they sent out. There was no, like, other than, an appreciation for Iman Shumpert for being part of the championship team.
Yeah.
I wasn't beholden as a fan to a single player that they sent out.
If I were to say there was one, it would be Channing Frye.
Who is
a guy.
I take it back. You're right.
But that's, but your point stands because Channing Frye is a 35-year-old player who has been in and out of the Cavs rotation for the last 2 years. We know he's not playable against the Warriors.
I can't wait to love him on TV.
Yeah, but he's awesome. But we love him every bit for his personality, even though I think he actually added something to this team, especially as a big man. But if that's the number one guy you're upset who they're sending out, and they're bringing back in this influx of youth and athleticism and shooting and defense.
Let's just say it's not Z for Anton Jameson.
No, it's certainly not that. But yeah, in losing Isaiah, I think everybody would agree is addition by subtraction. Shumpert too, to a degree, because
are you shocked that not only did we think losing Isaiah was addition by subtraction, but that the Cavaliers came to that conclusion and actually acted on it?
If you read the post-draft pieces, and that's like
especially Woj's
big
amazing.
24-hour look. He pretty much explicitly says the Cavs knew Isaiah had to go, and that's anybody who followed the team with any sort of reasonable amount of attention, I think, throughout the month of January could probably arrive at that conclusion. But you're right; it's for a hard-headed owner like Dan Gilbert, who reportedly loved Isaiah Thomas, which now I guess you could certainly dispute to different levels. But it is, I think what is indisputable was the Cavs made, I guess maybe it's not indisputable in the sense that the Cavs still have the Brooklyn pick. And I don't want to say the jury is still out on the Kyrie trade because obviously the optics of it are terrible right now. But if this trade deadline deal gives the Cavs the resurgence that it's thus far has looked like it will give them, and the Brooklyn pick winds up being a top 5, top 3 pick, that deal does look a lot different.
Yes.
And so I guess the idea was that Dan really liked the Celtics trade because he got a future asset and he got a big name in Isaiah, and maybe that's why he would be hesitant to trade Isaiah. But the fact that they did come to that, they didn't only trade him, they sent out a first-round pick with him, which I know was the price of getting Nance. But it's like they pretty much gave him up as salary cap filler in a deal.
Yes.
And I just think that's pretty remarkable.
So the idea that they not only sent him out, but sent him out with the first-round pick.
Right.
What does this do to kind of the narratives pre-trade deadline? And, we're pro-reporter. We're never going to, you and I, even when reporters get things wrong in the overall narrative, we never, for the most part, unless it's somebody we don't like, we don't doubt that they actually sourced it, they heard from this person. But there was a whole lot of narrative about Dan Gilbert running the team. Mm-hmm. And Dan Gilbert and LeBron despising each other, and I don't think I don't think they're friendly, and
no.
I don't think they talk a lot. But there's a level of coexistence and a level of Kobe Altman running the team that I was led to believe was totally different prior to the trade deadline.
Yeah, it's funny. I think Dan's fingerprints are all over the Boston trade. I think that, one, because of the situation he put them in a year ago, going basically an entire month without a GM, they almost had to be. And also when you're trading away a franchise player like Kyrie Irving, if you have any sort of hands-on owner, he's going to be very hands-on in that situation.
And even a hands-off owner would have to give the thumbs up on trading a player like that.
Sure. So I think that, so they make the Kyrie trade, and pretty much nothing happens between then and last Thursday. That doesn't mean Altman hasn't been working the phones. We know they were talking about DeAndre Jordan for a month. But really there's nothing that happens. So I guess Dan is a hands-on owner. That is clear. I mean, that's still out there. The reporters we both respect have that out there. But this was also Kobe Altman's first real chance to do anything. And I always think it's funny that these deals, for whatever reason, happen right at the trade deadline. Why don't they happen 2 weeks earlier? Why do they happen? Why don't they happen 2 days earlier?
If the trade deadline was 2 days earlier, that would happen. But everybody uses that pressure window to make a thing happen. But and I guess we always should have realized that regardless of the reported dynamics of the front office and the ownership, that we never should have imagined that Dan Gilbert was calling the GM of the Lakers.
Right.
Or that Kobe Altman was handling all that business and if this goes this way and this goes that way, but Dan gets up or down votes and a strike vote on it, a veto on anything.
Yeah, no, and that's any owner, but I don't think it absolves Dan of necessarily the narrative that was out there, because I do think last summer was such a disaster, and if there's so much murkiness to how the Paul George deal fell apart.
Yes.
Because on the one hand, I think there was a deal to acquire George and Bledsoe, and from what's out there, it seems like it didn't happen because Gilbert didn't get the assurances from LeBron that he'd stay. But then there's the deal between Denver and Indiana and Cleveland, which just fell apart because Indiana pulled out. Right. So I don't know what all to believe in terms of that.
When it's hard to now that the deadline's come and gone and Kobe Altman did all the things that he's done, it's hard to fault Dan for not being willing to put all his eggs in LeBron and Paul George, both of whom could be gone.
Right.
And that's not to say that the Cavaliers shouldn't stink on ice. If LeBron decides to leave, they should. They probably shouldn't try and keep hanging on as they are. But it depends. It depends on a lot of variables, of course. Mm-hmm. But at least now, Jordan Clarkson makes a lot of money, and it's not the greatest deal. But that's an asset under control. It'll be an expiring deal that'll have some value. Now they've got these 4 pieces that should have more value than Paul George walking out the door, or So
right.
It not only enabled, in hindsight or postscript, the Cavaliers can compete this year with LeBron James way better than they could before, and they also have the ability not to, all right, we're going to rebuild on the fly, but movable pieces.
No, they do. I mean, that was one of the biggest things about this is I think it gave you, and it's so hard to do, it gave you help for the present and potentially the future. Like Rodney Hood is a guy who this summer they're going to try to re-sign to hopefully a long-term deal. Yeah. Nance Jr. is a guy who they have under control for a few more years, and I think they can come to an extension too.
I think it's one more.
I think they can do an extension, though, this fall maybe.
Yes.
Or this summer. But, yeah, I mean, it sets them up. Even George Hill, I think he's owed $19 million next year. But that's a valuable contract to have when teams are going to be trying to clear cap space for 2019. There's a lot to like about the deal. I mean, I don't know what you could dislike about the deals. And maybe that you could quibble over whether they needed to send a first-round pick to the Lakers. But it seems like that was the price of getting Nance, who seems to be as big of a part of this deal as anything. So that's...
Well, and by trading the Cavaliers' first-round pick, they kind of put a governor on themselves because now they're not allowed to trade that Brooklyn pick. And they show that they were willing to trade a pick, and you could argue that they're smart because they were going to have to give up a pick, and they didn't have to give their most valuable pick. And that by the way, and this is what I've been thinking about all the time that we've been talking about this, that Brooklyn pick is still kind of that lottery ticket. If that turns out to be a star, even 75% of what Kyrie Irving is,
right,
they will potentially have won the Kyrie Irving trade.
I think that...
Which is weird to say because I never would have said that. From the moment they traded Kyrie, I said, you cannot get better when you're losing the best player in the deal.
Well, I think it will depend on what LeBron does because I think Kyrie still being here makes it a lot easier for LeBron to still be here. And if LeBron, I don't know. I don't know if they'll ever win the trade, but it will. It already looks a whole. And this is, they punted on Isaiah, they punted on Jay Crowder, and that's fine. But
those guys punted on the Cavs too.
Right. And a lot of it depends on where the pick winds up, which I think is one of the things that also looked bad a month ago was the Nets were winning games, and now it's still going to be dumb luck because all of the bad teams at the bottom of the league right now are separated by only like a game or two, and the Nets are the only team with no incentive to tank, and that's going to be, I think, scary. But
dumb luck's a part of the NBA. The Clippers pick never should have been Kyrie.
Yeah.
The Cavaliers pick was Tristan Thompson. Could you imagine if that draft had gone Cavs take Tristan Thompson, and then the Clippers pick had been lower than that?
Right.
I mean, it could have happened.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, but you're certainly right. But they're lessening their luck, or it looks like a diminishing asset at times, and then other times it looks like it could be the top 3 pick. So we'll see. I do want to get back to Dan Gilbert real quick though, because I thought last Thursday was like the full spectrum of the Dan Gilbert experience.
Yeah.
Because like that Boston trade was a mess, and his fingerprints were all over it. And it looked like the roster was in disarray. It looked like he was greasing the doors for LeBron to leave, even pushing him out maybe. It
sure felt like it.
Yeah, I mean, they were like Stephen A. Smith, I think, was like alluding to it at times. And people were basically saying that Dan Gilbert is trying to take control back over his team, and he doesn't care that this roster is a mess and that this potential last season of LeBron's going to waste. And Dan Gilbert bears a large responsibility for that being the narrative and that being the case. On the other hand, he just threw a whole lot of money, which I don't think spending is the only criteria we should judge owners on.
Sure.
But in a town with the Dolans and with the Haslams, the fact that Dan Gilbert is looking at these historic luxury tax bills and salary payrolls and all this, and the fact that he's still throwing money at the problem, it's the good and the bad of Dan Gilbert is he'll get you in a mess, and he'll also do his best to try to spend his way out of it.
And at the same time, you couldn't have remade the Cavaliers roster the way that they remade it at the trade deadline in the offseason with the Kyrie and free agency. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. And they suffered through the first part of the season. We suffered as watchers of the Cavaliers along with it.
Yeah.
And then they pulled it off at the trade deadline. It has me questioning my own thoughts about the different narratives that were going around, and maybe I was a little bit too hard on Dan Gilbert, and maybe not.
So why do you think that?
Well, because in the end, he left the team without a GM for a while, but he apparently empowered a guy who was totally capable of doing the job. Mm-hmm. I don't think these early returns, even if they go down a little bit, I don't think that I'll ever look back on this. I mean, Delonte fell off the face of the earth.
Right.
That was still an amazing trade to reshape the roster of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And Wally Zerbiak got old very quickly, and that was still a great trade. I don't think I'll ever look at this trade as a failure. No. And that was all Dan Gilbert. And so you all right, we got two sides of the balance.
Right.
He left Griff to swing in the wind and had a rough off season, but maybe it was always going to be rough because they had a superstar who demanded to be traded, or this idea that they didn't have to trade him. Where would they be today if they hadn't had to trade him?
Right.
I don't know. Would they be better off? I don't know, because we're also learning something about LeBron. And LeBron took a lot of bullets over the first half of the season about, he's supposed to be a leader, he's supposed to be this. And in hindsight, it's like, did we really expect LeBron to lead a roster of guys who think they are his peers? I know it's silly between you and me, but we don't think of those guys as his peers. But Dwayne Wade, Isaiah Thomas, even former MVP Derrick Rose, those guys think they're on the same level. Right. They're not just going to fall in line like any of the four guys that they brought in.
It is one of those things that even looking at the roster at the start of the year, it's like, okay, who's not going to make the playoff rotation? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be Derrick Rose? Is it going to be Isaiah? Is it going to be Dwayne Wade? There's not. I mean, we've watched the playoffs enough to know that the rotations get really short, and it's hard to imagine a team where Derrick Rose, if you have him on your roster, is just there to be on the bench.
It was much easier when it was, all right, well, Mozgov can't play against the Warriors.
Right.
Because it was Mozgov.
Right. It was why the Dwayne Wade trade was actually necessary and not – I think the Cavs put a good PR spin on it, and they deserve credit for that, where they basically said, we respect Dwayne too much, we want to send him home. It seems like there were some rumblings there that Dwayne was pretty unhappy here and really regretted his I followed it because I listened to Le Batard's show and I listened to his local hour. His departure from Miami was really, really messy.
Oh, really messy.
And he basically let pride get in the way of Miami, I don't think truly wanted him back and pretty much gave him a contract that was 2 years for $40 million and said, this is our offer, take it or leave it. And the Bulls gave him a slightly bigger offer.
He got the third year.
Yeah, and so
the third year. So I think it was 3 years and 72 or 70, something like that.
And so he went to Chicago, and he seemed to regret that decision from day one, and he was never happy in Chicago. And I think he was happy in Cleveland at one point, but once they started losing, he really wasn't. But
I think we see that in professional sports frequently, by the way. This goes back to our Jim Thome conversation.
Yeah. I
know you were pretty young back then, but I never got the sense that Jim Thome felt like it was worth his while to take that extra. He could have gotten those extra years.
Right.
He didn't need to guarantee it at signing by leaving a place that he didn't want to leave.
Yeah. But I think that – so this is back to your point. Dwayne Wade, I think, could have played a role on this team against the Warriors and in the playoffs.
I agree.
I think even with the addition of Hill and Clarkson, I think there was a place for Dwayne Wade to have minutes, especially with JR struggling the way he has. I think he's a very valuable off-the-bench guy. I think he would make it those post-ups that they would try with Livingston a lot tougher to do. But he was going to fall out of the rotation or at least have his minutes reduced, and you can't have that guy unhappy in your locker room.
No, you can't. But to your point, we also know that Dwayne Wade, when he knows there are potentially only 4 games left in the entire season, is a different player than the guy who's managing his effort over in the middle of an 82-game schedule.
Yeah. I guess I think another interesting thing about this, because they've presented it as LeBron signed off on trading Dwayne, which I'm sure they did. They wouldn't make that move without consulting with LeBron. LeBron is great friends with Dwayne Wade. I don't think he necessarily loves being Dwayne Wade's teammate anymore. I think that, he left him in Miami. And
when he got used to, in his first 3 or 4 years, he got used to really being the focal point again back in Cleveland. And, he finally honed his philosophies alongside Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and with Spoelstra. But this was his startup.
You're right.
This was his startup. And now, you don't want to bring in the old CFO.
Well, and I think there's just stuff like with Dwayne's health where, like, I guess at the end in Miami, I think Lebitard was saying this on a show, LeBron would get to the arena and Dwayne would say, I'm not playing today. And LeBron would be like, what do you mean you're not playing today? And it's just, I think it's one of those things where LeBron kind of said it in the first interview he gave where he's like, I see Dwayne all the time. Like, it's fine. Like, I don't need to be his teammate. So I just think that's kind of an interesting, I will say this is kind of funny. So I went to the Cavs team shop the day after the trade and they had all the former players' jerseys on sale. And I haven't bought a new Cavs jersey yet. And I like to have jerseys like to have fun in. I don't really wear them to games or wear them out like to go to the mall or anything anymore. But I bought a Dwayne Wade authentic Cavs jersey for half price. And that's to make up for the fact I'd never had a Shaquille O'Neal Cavs jersey.
It's funny because that's like one of my favorite Twitter things is like longtime Cavalier Dwayne Wade breaks this record.
Cavs lifer.
I love it. So it's a perfect jersey and a half off. I'm not the guy who would buy it for the joke, but I'm fully.
It's not even really a joke. It's just like I love the fact that Dwayne Wade played here. Like
it's so crazy.
It's insane. It's so representative of what LeBron, just the star power.
And you're right. Shaquille O'Neal never should have played a minute for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Think about that.
I mean, the most dominant center of my lifetime, who was like a shoo-in MVP candidate who got taken for granted.
Yeah.
Like, that guy never should have played here.
No.
And he did.
Yeah, for a year. And it's hilarious.
That was the first time the star power came in, was imported by LeBron. And I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah. But anyways, can you believe, just looking back at how, if I would have told you that in 2011, LeBron would not only be back in Cleveland, but Dwayne Wade would be in Cleveland, and the Cavs are going to trade him back to the Heat.
It would have been a full-on Heatles reunion if Chris Bosh wasn't retired.
I guess he said today, I think on First Take, that he's eyeing a comeback.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we'll never see the Big Three in Cleveland.
But we'll welcome Chris Bosh to work himself back into shape on the Cavaliers, because that's a guy who would add something, and would know his role.
Yeah.
And would take what he could get. Not what he could get, but you know what I mean.
Right.
He'd fit in.
Right.
He was Kevin Love before Kevin Love.
He actually did a very good job, and everybody criticized him very.
How bitter were people when he started talking about what Kevin Love was going to have to do when LeBron came back?
I know. Oh, my God.
Turns out Chris might have known what he was talking about.
He knew exactly what he was talking about. I think his legacy has been strengthened by the struggles Kevin Love has gone through in Cleveland, because it just goes to show how hard that third banana role is, playing especially with guys like LeBron and Kyrie and Dwayne Wade.
I think we should roll the dice on the Browns, and we should record it for a separate podcast.
Okay.
And think that not enough is going to change by next week. So we'll leave everybody in suspense with our Browns thoughts.
Yes. How do you process the Larry Nance Jr. aspect of this deal? This is a very Cleveland sports.
I love every little bit of it. Just Larry Nance was such a formative athlete in my upbringing in terms of being a sports fan. You know, those teams that played at Richfield, Mark Price and Larry Nance. I don't know that he can live up to it, because the 89, so the 8, 9, 10-year-old version of myself put athletes on a different pedestal, and I'm a 39-year-old man. So Larry Nance Jr. is not going to mean quite what what his dad meant to the 10-year-old version of myself.
Right.
But it's pretty special, man.
It's cool. It's really, really cool. I'm too young to remember Larry Nance playing for the Cavs, but I remember. Obviously, I know the name Larry Nance. I see the jersey in the rafters. I know who he is. I know the kind of player he was. I know about the dunks and the slam dunk contest and all that. When I covered Ohio State basketball a few years ago, Wyoming played.
Oh wow!
Ohio State, and Larry Nance Jr. was on them and had an incredible game. And I talked to him post game and just asked about playing back in Ohio and what it was like. And I think his dad was at the game. And from that point, he wound up being a really, really good, obviously, college basketball player. And he led Wyoming to the NCAA tournament. I think they had an upset in the first round, and actually maybe they went to the Sweet 16. Like, he had one of those mini, you get those mini March Madness runs from the small school with the NBA guy on them. He did that, and I think the next year he tore his ACL. But so he's a guy whose career I've at least been tracking since college, and just always having that Northeast Ohio connection with him.
And as a player, he kind of, and I don't remember if James Posey came into the league with a 3-point shot, but Larry Nance Jr. reminds me a lot of of James Posey, and I think he can continue to develop and become an even greater version of himself. And he's the type of guy that I think can become a really, truly great NBA player in year 5, 6, 7, especially playing alongside LeBron.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that was the most disappointing thing for me about the Jay Crowder experience.
Yes.
Was I thought Jay Crowder was going to be one of those players who, playing next to LeBron, unlocked everything in his game. That it showed what a Swiss Army knife he could be, and the cuts and all of that stuff. And we never saw any of it.
No.
And it was really disappointing. And I mean, we've seen it. We've seen LeBron do it for JR. We've seen LeBron do it for
J.J. Hickson,
Sasha Pavlovic. Like, that 2-week stretch with Jawad Williams. Like, playing next to LeBron.
Don't forget Boobie Gibson.
It just seems to unlock something in guys, and for whatever reason, it just did not sync well with Jay Crowder. But
no.
I think Nance has already shown in 2 games he can be that guy.
When he is the energy guy that Tristan used to be, and I'm not mad at Tristan Thompson. I just don't know that he has it in him.
Right.
We talked about this last time. Not everybody is built to play the LeBron schedule, but anybody who plays with LeBron has to play the LeBron schedule.
Right.
And maybe the miles have caught up with Tristan. All those finals trips and playoff minutes. Not every player's got that in them.
It's actually one of my least favorite narratives with the Cavs is Tristan Thompson's contract.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because you talked about how maybe last summer was going to be difficult no matter what. This roster was going to be difficult no matter what. And that's a lot of people, especially with Tristan and JR, they get upset about these perceived bad deals, which look bad now. And probably are bad deals. At this point, you couldn't trade Tristan Thompson without sending out a first-round pick. Or you couldn't trade JR, although his contract's a little shorter, without attaching something of value to it. Nobody's trading for those guys, and they're not playing great this year. But this is the thing people forget about just the way the NBA works, is in the summer of 2014, when the Cavs signed, the Cavs had to trade away contracts to open up the cap space to sign LeBron. So they were already nearing the cap. Once they signed LeBron, signed Kyrie to his extension, and signed Kevin Love, and then signed Kevin Love, or traded for Kevin Love, and then signed him to an extension, the Cavs were capped out. And basically capped out once you fill out the rest of your roster. And so in the NBA...
And what does that mean? All you can do is...
re-sign your own guys. That's the only way. And so the fact that Griff pulled off that trade with the Knicks and Nuggets to get JR and Shump and Mozgov, that was really good, because those were the guys then who you could re-sign.
The only thing you can really be critical of the Cavs of, if you really feel like it, is the fact that they didn't re-sign Delly. But even Delly, when he signed his deal with Milwaukee, I was screwed up, Milwaukee, Minnesota. But they retrofitted a trade for that even.
Yep.
But
the exception that led to Dunleavy, who didn't work out. But yeah,
that's true. But the idea is that, all right, so they don't sign Shump. It's not like they could replace him. They don't sign JR. It's not like they could replace him. How do you replace Tristan Thompson?
Tristan's the biggest one, because you're capped out. you're trading a guy who at that point had proven himself to be very valuable against the Golden State Warriors. And then the year after they signed him to the extension, they won the finals, and he was probably their third most reliable player. At times, depending on what Kyrie was doing, I could argue Tristan during 2015 and 2016 was the second most, I don't want to say important player, but he was
I would like to call him the most disruptive player of the finals.
He was very valuable because
offensive rebounds.
The other thing was defensively, he could switch out onto the guards, which no other bigs can really do. Yes. He was like a one-of-a-kind player, and so it was either lose him for nothing and you're already capped out, so you can't re-sign anybody, or re-sign him to what at the time was a market value deal. And the other thing that's stupid is it's like they went through the 2016 finals, they would dominate the East, and he would have these games against like Toronto and Atlanta, especially Atlanta. He dominated Horford and Millsap, and he would have these games where it's like, yep, that's why they're paying him $82 million.
Oh, he got 14 rebounds tonight. Like, yeah,
right. Look what he's done to Al Horford, who people think is like the third best player in the Eastern Conference.
Not only that, the Cavaliers also signed him to the max before the year that the max became the max. The max became $26 million the year after Tristan Thompson signed for like 16 or 17.
It wasn't even the max. Just the numbers make it look like the max because it wasn't even a true max. I think they could have ultimately paid him like $100 million.
Fair enough.
But and it's splitting hairs. They signed him to a big money deal because he was worth a big money deal, and they wouldn't be able to replace him otherwise. If you're upset about that, all you're doing is counting Dan Gilbert's pocketbook for him.
And wishing that the Cavaliers had an extra G League guy on the roster.
And the other thing that's frustrating about it...
And I do think the Cavs should work the G League to find more talent.
I think, they're going to be getting Kendrick Perkins from it soon.
Yes.
The other thing is, it's such revisionist history now to say it's a bad deal because in that time, Tristan now is not as valuable as he was 2 years ago because, one, the emphasis on shooting has gone up even higher than what it was back then.
Right.
And two, Golden State signed Kevin Durant, which makes...
It's an impossible standard.
You can't take any player now and put him on the Cavs and say this player is important for stopping Golden State because you can't stop Golden State.
The Cavaliers could add Paul George for nothing right now in a fanciful world and still not be the favorites in the finals.
No, they wouldn't be.
That's the way it goes.
They wouldn't be. And it sucks, but it's what do you do?
And if the Cavs make the finals, they maybe have a 25% chance of winning the whole thing.
Although, I mean, it's funny because people seem to now, because of these trades, at least like the way they match up with them a little bit better.
It's definitely better because they don't have Derrick Rose and Isaiah Thomas pulling minutes.
Well, and they don't even, I'll say something that's refreshing a little bit. Obviously, you'd rather have Kyrie than George Hill. But yes. George Hill is the first defensive-minded point guard this team has had since, like, Eric Snow.
I was going to say Eric Snow, too.
Because Mo Williams used to get roasted in the playoffs.
Yeah. Although Mo Williams was at least a try-hard.
He didn't look like a try-hard when he was trying to keep Rondo in front of him in 2010. I also...
And now we get Larry Nance in the dunk contest.
And you get Larry Nance in the dunk contest, which you know he's going to put on his dad's.
Is Kyle Korver not in the three-point shootout?
I don't think he is.
That dude should be in the three-point shootout every year, all the time, no matter what.
I'm not going to... The Cavs always have seemed to have a three-point shootout guy. Whether it was Wesley Person or Mark Price or...
Kyrie.
Kyrie won it. I think, weren't Kyrie and Dion both in it in the same year once?
Yeah, they were.
The Cavs always seem to have their presence all over NBA All-Star Weekend. Just got an alert that Cleveland Canton has been selected as a finalist to host the draft in 2019 or 2020, which will probably happen.
We own the draft, man.
I think they should probably opt for 2020 if they have any say in it. And then just another thing, the JR contract you could argue a little bit more about because...
It was what, $460?
I think it was $460, but there's an option after a third, or it's only very smally guaranteed.
Okay.
After the third, like basically it's an opt out after the third, so he's in the second year of that. So the Tristan thing. The other thing is people will say there was no market for him, and there was never going to be a market because everybody knew the minute that he signed with anybody, the Cavs were going to match it. So they didn't. They just wanted the Cavs to overpay, and they thought maybe they would, and whether they did or not's a debate. JR is a little different because I don't know if there truly was a market for him, but he was also just the starting shooting guard on your NBA championship team.
Well, and what we're really talking about is if you got a better deal with JR, it would have been 13 instead of 15 million.
Right.
So what's the difference? He'd be just as untradeable at 13 million as he would be at 15.
Right.
We're splitting hairs over Dan Gilbert's money, which I think I'm on record on this podcast and any other that I don't care about any owner's money.
No,
it's not mine.
No, it's not at all. And
they can make more.
That's the thing, though. I just think it's such a lazy narrative to say, "Oh, LeBron got his boys paid." Like LeBron doesn't want what's best for the team. That he's more concerned with getting those guys paid.
Yeah, he's not more concerned. I think he did. I think he probably did get them paid, but it wasn't.
It helped.
It still made sense. He wouldn't have gotten them paid if it didn't make sense.
Right. He's also gotten a lot of other guys paid. So
sure.
Windhorst, I think, actually did a really good article about like all the extensions LeBron has helped set up, like Delly and all those guys, Mozgov. But yeah, I think it's. Anyways, I think the one concern though was you said you're not concerned about owners' money, and I certainly am not. You could though say even though the Cavs are over the cap, what if Dan is uncomfortable going this far over the cap? And he just proved that he's fine going above and beyond. So
having LeBron on your team creates a window of exceptional means, and Dan Gilbert has shown no signs of being unwilling to meet those exceptional circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get out of here on this. I guess just this trade now. We talked about how upset we were at the last time we spoke about the state of the Cavs. What does this do for you now, just moving forward in the way you process LeBron's free agency, the way you process the rest of the Cavs season?
I'm just as rejuvenated as it looks like the Cavaliers are on the court. It really showed me just how little fun I was having watching the Cavs this season. Mm-hmm. And even though we knew that the team was going to make the playoffs and probably make a deep run with their existing roster, as flawed as it was, this just goes to show the varying degrees of fun and quality that you can have with winning. And
right.
We usually associate losing with sadness.
Yeah, but especially here.
Man, this one showed us that winning could come with sadness too.
Yeah, it really could. Although they were not winning a lot of games.
They weren't.
Like you were, because I always would go to.
They gave us the streak early on though.
Yeah, they did. Well, that's it. You would go to that ESPN page though, and they have the win-loss thing on the side of each team's page, and just the amount of red for the losses that were there was so little green in between. And I think that at one point they went more than a month without winning back-to-back games, like just unheard of from a LeBron team. And now here they are entering the All-Star weekend having won 4 in a row. And it's just like, okay, now we have these new young players. Now we have it's definitely a different vibe. And I think for LeBron's free agency, now it doesn't feel like it's slipping away. And it doesn't feel like Dan Gilbert is pushing him out the door. And it feels like whether or not LeBron opts to stay and whether or not any of this matters, the Cavs have put together a much more compelling case between the upgrades on the roster, the youth on the roster, Dan Gilbert's more than proven willingness to spend, and that Brooklyn pick, which they could still trade because the type of deal that would come along would be, let's say, Kawhi Leonard is upset. Right. Or the Cavs would say, okay, we'll pick, I don't even know college, Trae Young. He's not a top 3 guy, but let's say we'll pick Trae Young and we'll swap him for Kawhi Leonard. That it could still come about.
Or they could just swap picks.
Right. Yeah. So there are ways to do it.
But I'm with you. Before it felt like the wheels were in motion for him to leave, and he still very well could leave. But you could make the argument. I'm not saying I'm making the argument, but I think you could reasonably make the argument now that the Cavaliers have done everything they could to try and keep him. within the confines of building a roster to win a championship and then dealing with the aftermath. And I mean, you don't get to just say, well, as we just talked about, you don't get to just say that Tristan Thompson's deal stinks and the Cavaliers stink for having done it. Like, the process, the order of events dictated they arrive at this location, and they did everything that they possibly could have at this trade deadline to make it compelling for him to stay.
Was there anything funnier about this than Isaiah Thomas going off in his first game as a Laker?
Oh, I love it. I just love it. I tried so hard to talk myself into liking Isaiah Thomas, but I didn't like him from, there's certain guys, to a lesser degree. Another Boston guy, Trot Nixon. When Trot Nixon came here, I was like, this guy is not a Cleveland Indian.
Right.
He's never going to be a Cleveland Indian to me. Isaiah Thomas was just a hard sell. It was a really hard sell, and now I'm really happy that I didn't have to finish selling him to myself.
He did himself no favors. He really got screwed by Boston. Boston, if it turns out that injury got misdiagnosed back in the spring and he kept playing through it, and it sounds like that's what happened because Boston fired all its doctors, like they cost him a lot of money.
I might look into a lawsuit if I'm Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, because he was looking at a max contract 6 months ago, and now he's probably looking at a 1 year, like $6 million prove-it deal. And
with escalators that it could be worth as much as.
I don't even know if escalators. I think it's probably more a team will then slap on a team option on the back end and say, and if you prove it.
He's going to have a contract comparable to Dion Waiters.
Yeah. Dion got a big prove-it deal, and he made good on it.
And who would have ever guessed that was going to happen?
And that was when the market was exploding. You're right. That's probably a really good comparison. Blast from the past. But that's going to do it for today's 3Sports podcast. Whenever you can end on Dion Waiters, I think you have to end on Dion Waiters.
When he was in Cleveland, I had friends who bowled with him.
Did you really?
Went bowling. It was an event.
Was it Nam?
I don't remember, but it was awesome. Everybody loved it. Dion Waiters was so much fun to hang out with. He just didn't get along with Kyrie on the court.
No. That's somebody. David made a good point the other day on Twitter about.
But I don't hate Dion Waiters.
No.
To this day, I think he's like an entertaining dude, and I wish he'd done better.
Yeah, no. David, I actually wanted to touch on this, so I'm glad you brought it up. I promise we'll wrap up here. But we do romanticize what those non-LeBron years were like. They weren't as fun as we remember.
No. It was Semi or Den.
Well, that was at the start, wasn't it? That was like the tanking year. But even the Kyrie Dion years, especially the last one before LeBron came back when there were actual expectations, they weren't really that fun. There was some hope, but it wasn't.
I still blame it on Byron Scott.
No, but he
was part of it anyway.
He was definitely part of it, but that Mike Brown year was not particular. That was actually, I treated the Cavs that Mike Brown year like I treat the Browns now, where I was like, this team can't get anything right, and they just traded for Luol Deng, who has proven to be the worst locker room guy this team will have until Isaiah Thomas.
That when they rehired Mike Brown, a couple weeks later, I had Brian Windhurst on the podcast, and we were talking about it, and it was just like, he was reporting the facts, but nobody was willing to like say, well, this is a great move. It was just like utter surprise, can't believe you never get to come home, and here's Mike Brown.
Oh boy, we'll have to do a deep dive into the non-LeBron years. Hopefully not in preparation of some more non-LeBron years. Exactly. But that's going to do it for today's 3Sports podcast. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review.
Leave a review. That 5-star review is big help.
Yes, please. Just it takes so little time, and it is a big help for us.
It's right there in the Apple app now.
It's easy to do in the podcast app.
It never used to be. You had to go to iTunes. Now you could just load it up on your app, scroll down a little bit on our podcast page, and give us that review.
I don't even think you have to leave a comment anymore. But if you do, that would help too. That's how I got Andrew Hawkins to unblock me on Twitter, was I left him a 5-star review on the Tomahawk Show. And I was happy to do it because it deserved a 5-star review. But for Craig Lindell, I'm Ben Axelrod. Thanks for listening, guys.